The clock ticked with sterile indifference as I sat in the examination chair, the sharp scent of antiseptic mixing with the faint aroma of rain from the window. My name is Truman Wells, 68 years old, retired carpenter, widower of 12 quiet years. My hands once built homes for strangers. Now they trembled when I lifted a cup of coffee. Every Tuesday, I came to Dr. Henderson's clinic for my arthritis treatment, a simple injection that kept the pain at bay. But that morning, something was off. The young nurse, Emma, hovered by the cabinet longer than usual, her eyes darting toward the hallway like a cornered rabbit. "Everything okay, Emma?" I asked. She forced a smile, her voice barely steady. "Just a moment, Mr. Wells. Doctor will be right in." Moments later, Henderson entered, his usually calm face pale, sweat beading at his temples. He didn't meet my eyes. He prepared the syringe silently, the clear liquid catching the light like a blade. "What's that?" I asked. "New formula," he muttered. "For your pain." But I'd lived long enough to know when someone was lying. His hands shook, and Henderson never shook. I pressed, "You sure this is safe?" He flinched. The needle trembled. Then, from the corner of the room, Emma whispered, "Doctor, please don't." The syringe froze midair. My stomach turned to ice. "What's going on?" I demanded, voice rising. The doctor dropped the syringe into the metal tray. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. He sank into the chair beside the cabinet, covering his face. "I'm sorry, Truman," he whispered. "He came to me last night, your son-in-law. He offered me $50,000 to inject you with something that would stop your heart within minutes. He said it would look natural." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in, the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing louder in my ears. "My own family. Jason," I croaked. "He wanted to kill me?" Henderson nodded miserably. "He said you were a burden to them, that you had money they needed sooner rather than later." Money. Always money. The same Jason who'd married my only daughter, sweet Abigail, 5 years ago. The man I'd welcomed into my home, trusted with my workshop, even loaned $10,000 to start his business. I sat there in silence, fists tightening until my knuckles went white. Henderson tried to apologize again, but I raised a hand. "No one can know about this," I said, voice steady, cold. "Not yet." Emma stared at me, horrified. "But, Mr. Wells," I said, "not yet." I looked her in the eye. "You just saved my life. Now let me decide what to do with it." When I left the clinic, the storm outside had turned into a steady drizzle. I pulled my jacket close and walked slowly down the street, feeling the weight of betrayal press against my chest. That night, as I sat alone in my dim kitchen, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and whispered to the empty room. "He thinks I'm weak. He has no idea who he's dealing with." That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that syringe. The cold glint of the needle haunted me like a phantom of betrayal. I sat by the kitchen window, the rain whispering against the glass, and I thought of Jason, his charming smile, his empty words, and how easily he'd fooled my daughter. Once, I believed he loved her. Now, I knew he loved my money. I wasn't a fool. My late wife, Margaret, had always said I was too trusting. "Truman," she used to warn, "people see your kindness and mistake it for weakness." Maybe she was right. Maybe Jason had seen the same thing. An old man, slowing down, whose days were numbered anyway. He just wanted to hurry the clock. But not this time. The next morning, I drove to the clinic again, early, before the doors opened. Dr. Henderson looked surprised when he saw me waiting in the parking lot. "I didn't tell anyone," he said quickly. "I know," I replied. "And you won't have to, not yet. But I need your help." He hesitated. "Truman, this is dangerous." I gave a small, bitter smile. "So is dying before your time." Inside, I handed him an envelope, the last of my savings, about $4,000 in cash. "Keep this safe," I said. "If anything happens to me, you give this story to the police. Everything you know. And tell them to test whatever was in that syringe." He took the envelope reluctantly, but I could see something shift in his eyes, a mix of guilt and respect. Before leaving, I asked for one more favor. "Can you give me something harmless, saline, vitamins, anything, that looks like my usual treatment? I want Jason to think everything's normal." Henderson nodded slowly. "You're planning something, aren't you?" "Just an old carpenter doing some repair work," I said quietly. "On a rotten foundation." That evening, I drove to my daughter's house for dinner. My first visit since the clinic. I wanted to look Jason in the eye. Abigail greeted me warmly, unaware of the poison brewing in her home. Dad, you look tired. Are you sure you're okay? I'm fine, sweetheart, I lied. Your husband taking good care of you? She smiled. Of course. Jason's been working hard lately. Hard? Yes, probably plotting his next move. Jason appeared from the kitchen, that familiar smug grin on his face. Truman, didn't expect you tonight. Just thought I'd drop by, I said, sitting down slowly. Been thinking about updating my will. Might need some advice. His expression froze for half a second, just long enough for me to see it. The greed flickered behind his eyes before he masked it with false cheer. Of course, he said, pouring me a drink. I'm happy to help however I can. I took the glass, but didn't drink. You're always helpful, Jason, I said softly. Always. We ate dinner together, pretending nothing was wrong. Abigail chatted about work, about their plans for a vacation in Florida. Jason nodded along, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the quick dart of his eyes every time I mentioned money or health. He was nervous. After dinner, I asked to see his home office. Need to print something, I said. He hesitated, then led me in. The room smelled like cologne and dust. Papers scattered across the desk, invoices and folders. I pretended to search for a pen, but instead spotted something. A small black notebook half hidden under the keyboard. While Jason stepped out to fetch a charger, I flipped it open. Inside, numbers, names, and one note that froze my blood. Dr. H, $50,000/Tuesday/clinic/no witnesses. I snapped a photo with my old flip phone and slid the notebook back in place just as he returned. You find what you need, he asked. Everything, I said, pocketing the phone. As I drove home that night, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Proof. Real proof. But revenge, I knew, wasn't just about exposing the guilty. It was about making them feel what they'd made me feel. Powerless, afraid, waiting for something to strike. So I decided to wait. I would act sick. I'd let him think his plan was working. And when he finally believed I was dying, that's when I'd strike. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost of myself, deliberately. Every movement, every word was measured. I dragged my feet when I walked, let my shoulders sag, and practiced a faint tremor in my hands until it seemed real. My reflection in the mirror looked hollow, exhausted, exactly what Jason wanted to see. And he believed it. Abigail started visiting more often, bringing homemade soup, tucking the blanket around me as if I were a child again. Her eyes were full of love and worry, and every time she asked, "Are you sure you're okay, Dad?" it tore something inside me. I hated lying to her, but I had to. Jason, however, was colder each day. He'd stand behind her, fake sympathy plastered on his face. He'd say things like, "He's had a good life, honey," or, "Maybe it's time we start thinking about long-term care." Words dipped in poison, spoken with a grin. I'd nod and pretend not to notice. But I noticed everything. At night, I rehearsed my lines like an actor preparing for a cruel play. Coughs, groans, fatigue. I gave the performance of my life. During the day, I forgot to take my medication, fell asleep mid-conversation, and left important papers on the counter to make it look like my memory was slipping. Abigail begged me to see the doctor again. I agreed, of course, because that was part of the plan. Dr. Henderson played along. He faked reports showing accelerated cardiac deterioration. Jason's eyes nearly lit up when he read them. I could tell he was already counting the inheritance in his head. After the visit, Henderson pulled me aside. "Truman," he whispered, "he's going to try again. You can't keep doing this. It's too dangerous." I smiled faintly. "You once told me you owed me a life. Consider this how you repay it." He looked at me like I was a man walking willingly into a fire. Maybe I was. But I'd built my entire life with fire, shaping it, controlling it. I knew how to stand close without getting burned. That evening, I went to dinner at Abigail's house. The air was heavy with tension I pretended not to feel. Jason opened the door with that same sickening charm. "Truman, you look, well, considering. Guess I'm too stubborn to die yet," I said softly. At the table, Abigail talked about vacations, church events, small things that filled the silence. Jason's smile never reached his eyes. He was studying me, searching for signs that his plan was working. I gave him plenty to see. I coughed halfway through the meal, pressed a napkin to my lips. I'd even added a few drops of red ink earlier, just enough to make it look like blood. Abigail gasped. Jason's eyes widened for just a moment. Excitement, not concern. That look alone was worth every ounce of acting. After dinner, I asked to print something in his office. Need to update a few documents, I said. He hesitated. It's messy in there. I don't mind mess, I replied, smiling. While he stepped away to grab my reading glasses, I noticed a small black notebook under the keyboard. My pulse steadied as I lifted it. Inside were scribbles, debts, phone numbers, cryptic notes. But one line made my blood run cold. Dr. H. $50,000 Tuesday clinic no witnesses. It was enough to end him. But I didn't close the notebook yet. I turned one more page and found another note. Abigail can't know. Handled before holidays. I snapped a photo with my old phone and slid the book back just as Jason returned. You find what you need? He asked. I smiled slowly. Everything I need. That night, I met Henderson and a private investigator he'd contacted. Mark Halley, a retired cop who'd once worked financial crimes. His handshake was firm, his eyes cold but honest. You want to take this guy down quietly? Mark asked. I want him to destroy himself, I said. Public humiliation won't hurt him like watching everything slip away. Mark smirked. You're not the first man I've seen plan a revenge, but you might be the calmest. I've spent my life building. Now it's time to dismantle something. Over the next days, Mark dug deep, found hidden gambling accounts, unpaid loans, and evidence Jason had taken a second mortgage behind Abigail's back. Every page of that report was another nail in Jason's coffin. Mark offered to take it to the police, but I stopped him. Not yet. I want him to believe he's won first. I want him to feel safe. 3 days later, I staged a fainting episode. Collapsed right in my garden while trimming the hedges. My neighbor saw it and called Abigail, who rushed over crying. Jason followed, pretending to panic. Henderson arrived to play his part. Fake tests, somber expressions, and a quiet declaration. His heart's giving out. It could be weeks, maybe days. Jason squeezed my hand and said, We'll take care of everything, Truman. You just rest. And that was when I knew the game was almost over. That night, Henderson gave me a small USB stick. Here, he said, all the proof. His messages, the bribe, your photo from the clinic camera. You can finish this anytime. But I wasn't ready to finish it. Not yet. I wanted Jason to walk right into his own grave. So I stopped answering calls. Turned off the lights. Let the neighbors whisper that old Truman Wells was fading fast. I wanted Jason desperate, reckless. And one night, I got what I wanted. Around midnight, I saw headlights outside. Jason's car. Engine off. Door opening slowly. Through the curtain, I watched him approach, clutching something in a small plastic bag. He paused at the side door, the one I'd left unlocked on purpose. The lock clicked. The door creaked. And I whispered into the dark. Welcome to the show, Jason. The night was soaked in silence. Even the crickets outside seemed to sense that something sinister was about to unfold. The only light came from the dim lamp in my hallway, casting long shadows over the wooden floorboards I'd built decades ago with my own hands. It felt poetic. The same boards that once supported my family's laughter were now the stage for betrayal. I sat motionless in my armchair, eyes half closed, breathing slow and shallow, pretending to be asleep. Every nerve in my body was awake, though sharp as the edge of a blade. Hidden behind the clock on the mantel was a small camera Mark had installed earlier that week. Another was tucked into the bookshelf, and one more above the kitchen doorway. They were small, silent, and connected to a drive recording everything in real time. This time, I wasn't the prey. The door creaked open, and a faint beam of moonlight slid across the floor. Jason's silhouette appeared, tall, careful, but nervous. He moved with the clumsy quiet of a man trying to hide his guilt from God. I could hear his shallow breathing even from across the room. He was holding a small plastic bag. Inside, I saw the outline of a syringe. My heart clenched, not from fear, but from the sick irony of it all. He was about to finish what he thought Dr. Henderson had failed to do. Jason whispered into the dark, "Old man, you still awake?" I didn't move. I let my chest rise and fall just enough to mimic sleep. He stepped closer. The floor creaked beneath him, and I could smell the faint mix of sweat and expensive cologne. He leaned down beside my chair, watching my face. His whisper trembled. "Sorry, Truman. It's better this way. You'll just go peacefully. No more pain. He pulled out the syringe, tapped it like he'd seen in movies, and reached for my arm. That's when I opened my eyes. Evening, Jason, I said softly. He froze. The syringe slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. What the hell? You were supposed to sleep? I interrupted. Yeah, that's what you wanted, isn't it? Eternal sleep. His face drained of color. You don't understand. Oh, I understand, I said, leaning forward slowly. I understand that you offered my doctor 50 grand to poison me. I understand that you think my money matters more than my life. And I understand that you just broke into my house carrying a syringe filled with God knows what. Jason backed away, stammering. You can't prove anything. I pointed toward the mantel clock. That's funny, because you're being filmed right now from 3 different angles. His eyes darted around the room, panic creeping into his voice. You're bluffing. Am I? I said, reaching for the remote beside my chair. I pressed a button, and the TV flickered to life. On the screen appeared a split view from the cameras, his terrified face frozen in real time. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the rug. Truman, listen, I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to? I repeated, standing up. My knees ached, but I stood tall anyway. You meant every bit of it. Every lie you fed my daughter. Every visit you made to my doctor. Every whisper about how I'm a burden. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. I was desperate. I needed the money. The business. The business you stole from me, I said coldly. The one I loaned you $10,000 to start. The same business you gambled away while pretending to be a husband. He pressed his hands to his face, trembling. Please, Truman, don't ruin me. I'll disappear. I'll pay you back. I laughed softly, a dry, bitter sound. You already ruined yourself the moment you tried to play God with my life. I reached into my pocket and tossed a small USB stick onto the coffee table. Everything you've done is on there. Messages, payments, notes, recordings. Copies have already been sent to my lawyer and my friend at the sheriff's office. If anything happens to me, Jason, the world will know what you are. He stared at the USB like it was a loaded gun. Why are you doing this? He whispered. Why not just hand me over now? I leaned closer until our eyes met. Because real punishment isn't prison, Jason. It's waking up every morning knowing your mask is slipping and everyone's watching. For a moment, the house was silent. Then Jason bolted toward the door. I didn't stop him. The cameras caught every second. His panic, his guilt, his escape. When the door slammed shut, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My body shook, partly from adrenaline, partly from the weight of what had almost happened. I walked to the window and watched him run to his car, fumbling with the keys, then speeding away into the darkness. I should have felt victorious. But instead, I felt hollow. Because beneath all the anger and satisfaction, there was something heavier, heartbreak. He was still my daughter's husband, the man she loved, the father of my unborn grandchild. How do you tell your daughter that the man she shares her bed with wanted to kill her father? The thought gnawed at me as I turned off the lights. The house felt quieter than ever, as if it, too, was holding its breath. I picked up the syringe from the floor, wrapped it carefully in a handkerchief, and placed it inside a drawer. Then I sat back down, staring at the clock, the silent witness of the night's events. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Jason wasn't done, and neither was I. The game had only just begun. The next morning, sunlight crawled across my living room floor, revealing the chaos Jason had left behind. A toppled chair, the faint outline of his muddy footprints, and the syringe I'd placed in a sealed bag. Everything was still, but the air felt heavy, as if the house itself remembered what had happened. I made coffee like I always did, steady and deliberate. The smell filled the kitchen, comforting and bitter. But I couldn't taste it. My mind was already running through the next steps. Not in anger anymore, but with the cold precision of a man who'd built his life on patience. I turned on my laptop and opened the footage from last night. Every detail was there. Jason breaking in, whispering my name, pulling out the syringe, freezing when I spoke. His fear was so raw it almost made me pity him. Almost. Mark Halley came by around noon. He was a big man with tired eyes, a face carved by years of seeing people ruin their own lives. He watched the footage silently, arms crossed, then gave a low whistle. Well, Truman, he said, you've got him dead to rights. Attempted murder, evidence tampering, premeditation. He's finished. I leaned back in my chair. Maybe, but I'm not taking this to the police yet. Mark frowned. You're kidding me. He broke into your house with a syringe, for God's sake. What are you waiting for? Him to come back with something worse? I stared out the window, at the oak trees swaying in the autumn breeze. I'm waiting for the right moment. A storm doesn't hit harder because it's loud. It hits harder because no one sees it coming. He sighed. You're playing a dangerous game, old man. I know, I said, but it's my game now. That evening, Abigail called. Her voice was soft, but I could hear something broken in it. Dad, Jason didn't come home last night. He said he needed space. Did something happen between you two? My heart twisted. The truth sat heavy on my tongue, but I couldn't say it. Not yet. I haven't seen him, I lied gently. Maybe he just needs time to think. There was silence on the line. Then she whispered, he's been different lately. Cold. I don't know what's going on with him. You'll know soon, I said softly. Just promise me you'll stay safe. I will, she murmured. Love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet for a long time. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of keeping the truth from her. I wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. I was doing it to protect her. Because when the truth came out, it wouldn't just destroy Jason, it would destroy her too. 3 days passed. I didn't hear from Jason, but I knew he was unraveling. Mark kept tabs on him through a private contact in the sheriff's office. Jason had emptied his joint account with Abigail, sold his car, and visited his lawyer twice. He was desperate, cornered animals always are. Then, on the 4th day, he showed up. I saw his truck pull into my driveway just as the sun was setting. I didn't move. I let him come to the door, let him knock 3 times before I opened it. His face was pale, eyes sunken, the charm long gone. Truman, please, he said, voice trembling. You have to delete that footage. I'll do anything. I'll leave town. I'll sign over the business. Just don't ruin me. I stepped aside silently. Come in. He hesitated, then walked in. I gestured toward the chair across from me. Sit. He did. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely hold the glass of water I offered him. You know, I said quietly, I watched that footage again this morning. You said something interesting that night, that it was better this way. You thought you were giving me peace. Was that how you justified it? His jaw clenched. I didn't mean to. Save it, I interrupted. You meant every word. You just didn't expect me to wake up. He lowered his head, whispering, I was drowning, Truman. The debts, the people I owe, they're not the kind you can reason with. I thought if I just got the money, you'd be free. I finished. You don't get free by killing the man who trusted you. He covered his face, sobbing quietly. It almost sounded human, but I'd heard too many fake apologies in my life to fall for one more. I'm giving you one chance, I said finally. You'll sign over every property, every account, every share of that worthless business. You'll leave my daughter, cleanly, quietly, without taking a cent. And if you ever come near her again, I'll make sure every inch of that footage finds its way to the evening news. He looked up slowly, horror filling his eyes. You're blackmailing me? No, I said calmly. I'm saving her from you. That night, he signed everything. His signature shook, his hands sweating through the papers. When it was done, he stood at the door, shoulders slumped. Truman, he said weakly, she's going to hate you when she finds out. Maybe, I said, but she'll be alive to do it. He nodded once, eyes hollow, and walked out into the darkness. His truck engine roared, then faded down the road until only silence remained. I watched through the window until his taillights disappeared. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled deeply. The game was over. Or so I thought. Because later that night, when I turned off the lights and headed toward my bedroom, I noticed something glinting on the porch. A small envelope, sealed and unmarked. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single photo. It was of me, sitting in my armchair, asleep, taken from outside my window. And on the back, in Jason's handwriting, were 3 words. It's not over. The photo felt heavier than paper had any right to. I turned it over in my shaking hands again and again, hoping the handwriting wasn't real. But I knew it was. The way Jason formed his T, long and sharp like a knife, was burned into my memory from old birthday cards and thank you notes he'd written when he still pretended to be a good man. It's not over. Those 3 words dragged me back into a war I thought I'd already won. I looked through the window where the photo had been taken. The glass reflected nothing but my own tired face, but I could still feel the eyes that had been there, watching. He'd been close. Too close. I stepped outside into the cold night, my flashlight cutting through the dark like a blade. The wind carried the faint smell of gasoline and wet leaves. My old truck sat by the curb, untouched. But near the mailbox, I found cigarette ashes, fresh ones, and tire tracks pressed deep into the mud. Jason had been here less than an hour ago. I called Mark immediately. "He's back," I said. "He was watching me." Mark grunted through the receiver. "What did he leave?" "A photo. Of me. Sleeping." "All right," Mark said, voice calm but firm. "Listen carefully. He's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. Lock your doors, stay inside, and don't confront him alone." "I'm not running from him," I said quietly. "I'm not asking you to run," Mark replied. "I'm asking you to live long enough to see this through." The next day, I drove into town to check on Abigail. I told her I had errands, but truthfully, I just needed to see her with my own eyes. She opened the door in a robe, her hair tied up, dark circles under her eyes. "Dad, you're up early." I forced a smile. Couldn't sleep. Her living room was littered with boxes, Jason's clothes gone, his photos taken down from the shelves. "You two had a fight?" I asked carefully. She sighed, sitting down on the couch. "He said he needed space. He's been acting strange, paranoid. Last night, I swear I heard someone outside the house. When I looked through the curtains, there was a car just sitting there. And then it drove off." My stomach tightened. "What kind of car?" "A black Ford pickup," she said. "Why?" I forced my tone to stay even. "No reason. Probably kids." But I knew better. Jason was circling us like a wolf that refused to starve. That night, I couldn't stay still. I checked the locks twice, then 3 times. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, sounded like footsteps. I kept the loaded revolver my father left me on the table beside the armchair. I hadn't fired it in 30 years, but my hand remembered its weight. At midnight, headlights flashed briefly through the window, then vanished. I turned off the lamp, listening. Silence. Then a faint thud. I rose slowly, heart pounding, and moved toward the front door. The porch light flickered as I stepped outside. Nothing. Just wind brushing through the trees. I was about to turn back when I saw it. Another envelope, resting on the porch railing. This one had a single Polaroid inside. It was Abigail, asleep in her bed. No message this time. None needed. I drove to her house before dawn, gravel spitting beneath my tires. The moment she opened the door, she saw my face and froze. "Dad, what happened?" I held up the photo. "When was this taken?" She frowned. That's last night." "But how?" "He was outside your window," I said grimly. "He's watching you now, Abby." Her face went pale. "Jason?" "No, he wouldn't." "Don't defend him," I said, maybe too sharply. "You have to leave this house. Pack a bag. You're coming with me." Tears filled her eyes. "Dad, you're scaring me." "Good," I said, "because if you're scared, maybe you'll listen." Within an hour, we were back at my place. She was shaken, confused, and silent. I didn't tell her everything. Not about the syringe, not about the videos. Not yet. She only knew Jason had crossed the line. Mark came by that afternoon, his face grim. "He's unraveling," he said. "I've been tracking his movements. He's been sleeping in his truck, circling your neighborhood. He's drinking heavy. He's got nothing left to lose." "Then he's dangerous," I said. Mark nodded. "Very. We can get a restraining order, maybe set a trap." "No." I looked out the window at the long stretch of road leading to my house. "He won't go to court. He'll come here first. He wants to scare me, maybe finish what he started." "And you're gonna let him?" "I'm gonna end it," I said quietly. That night, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I sat by the window with my revolver resting on my lap, watching the darkness beyond the trees. Abigail slept in the guest room, unaware that the same man she once called her husband was hunting her father. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The wind howled against the glass, carrying the smell of rain and earth. Then, sometime after 2, I heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel. Headlights flickered at the far end of the driveway, then cut out. He was here. My pulse steadied. No fear this time, just quiet resolve. I reached for the recorder Mark had given me, pressed the red button, and whispered into it. "If you find this, His name is Jason Miller. He's coming for us tonight." Then I turned off the lamp, slid the revolver into my coat pocket, and stepped into the shadows. The sky cracked open before dawn. A cold wind whipped through the trees, shaking loose the last of the autumn leaves. Thunder rolled in the distance like the slow beating of a warning drum. It was the kind of storm that made animals hide and men remember their sins. I sat by the window, revolver in hand, waiting. My old heart thudded with a rhythm I hadn't felt since the war, that strange mix of fear and purpose. Abigail slept in the guest room, her breathing soft and steady. I told her the storm would pass soon. She didn't know that another one was about to begin inside these walls. When the first drop of rain hit the porch, I saw it. The flicker of headlights through the curtain. Jason's truck rolled up slowly, engine humming low, like a predator growling under its breath. He didn't even bother turning the lights off this time. He wanted me to see him coming. I whispered to myself, "So this is how you want it, boy." The truck door opened. Jason stepped out, soaked instantly by the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. He was wearing a black jacket, his hands buried deep in his pockets. Even from a distance, I could see the madness in his eyes, that desperate shine of a man with nothing left to lose. He walked to the door and began pounding. "Truman, open up. We need to talk." I stayed still. "Open the damn door, old man," he shouted again, his voice half drowned by thunder. I finally stood and opened it a crack. "You've said enough already, Jason." He pushed his way in, dripping rainwater onto the floor. "You ruined me. You made me sign everything away. You took my life." "You did that yourself," I said evenly. "I just handed you the mirror." He laughed, a dry, broken laugh that made my skin crawl. "You think you're clever, huh? You think you won? Look around, Truman. You've got nothing but a pile of wood and a dying name. Nobody cares what happens to you." "Maybe not," I said, lifting my eyes to his. "But someone still cares about what happens to her." At that, his grin faltered. "Abigail. She's asleep. Safe. You won't touch her again." Jason shook his head, water dripping from his hair. "You think she'll ever believe you? You think she'll forgive you for turning her against me?" "I don't need her to forgive me," I said quietly. "I just need her alive." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You can't protect her forever." I raised the revolver and aimed it at his chest. "Watch me." For a moment, everything froze. The rain outside, the flickering light, even the sound of thunder. He stared at the gun, then back at me, and I saw it in his eyes, not fear, but hatred so deep it almost looked like sorrow. "Go ahead," he said softly. "You don't have the guts." "Try me," I whispered. He lunged. The struggle was fast, violent, and clumsy. The gun went off once, deafening in the small room, shattering the old clock on the wall. We stumbled, crashing into furniture, the revolver sliding across the floor. Jason's fist caught my jaw, knocking me backward, but years of working wood had left me strong in strange ways. I grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a heavy iron candlestick, and swung. It connected with a sickening thud. Jason collapsed to his knees, gasping. His hand groped for something under his jacket. I saw the glint of metal, a knife. I kicked it away, breathing hard. "You really thought this through, didn't you?" He coughed, eyes blazing. "You ruined everything." I stood over him, rainwater dripping from my coat, the sound of thunder filling the silence between us. "No, Jason. I just showed you what you really are." His body went still, but his eyes didn't close. They stared up at me, defiant to the last. I didn't pull the trigger again. I didn't have to. The storm outside did the rest, wind howling through the open door, lightning flashing like judgment itself. When it was over, I called Mark. He arrived 20 minutes later, rain-soaked and grim. Together, we dragged Jason's unconscious body out of the house. He was alive, barely. Mark called the sheriff, and before dawn, red and blue lights cut through the fog like salvation and sorrow rolled into one. The sheriff asked me what had happened. I told him the truth, or at least the part that mattered. He broke in. He tried to kill me. I defended myself. They took Jason away in handcuffs, wrapped in a wet blanket, head bowed. I watched from the porch as the cruiser disappeared down the muddy road. The storm began to fade, leaving behind that eerie calm only dawn can bring. I looked up at the pale light breaking through the clouds and felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not triumph, just quiet. Abigail appeared at the doorway behind me, tears streaking her face. "Dad, what happened?" I turned to her, voice gentle. "It's over now, sweetheart." She stepped into my arms, trembling. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," I whispered, holding her tighter. "All you need to know is that you're safe." When she went back inside, I sat alone on the porch, watching the sun climb over the horizon. The storm had washed everything clean, the blood, the lies, the fear. But it couldn't wash away what we'd lost. People think revenge feels like victory, but it doesn't. It feels like silence. And in that silence, I finally heard my wife's voice in my head, soft and weary. "Truman, people see your kindness and mistake it for weakness." I smiled sadly. "Not anymore, Margaret. Not anymore." The courthouse smelled like rain and fear. The storm that had nearly destroyed my home had followed us here, turning the sky outside gray and heavy. I sat on the wooden bench near the front, hands clasped together, the veins on my wrists like old rope. I'd faced many things in my life: war, loss, loneliness, but nothing hurt quite like this. Watching my daughter walk into a courtroom to face the truth about the man she once loved. Jason sat across the aisle, wearing a pale orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. His face was thinner, paler, but the arrogance was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. He refused to look at me, though once or twice I caught him glancing toward Abigail. Every time he did, her shoulders stiffened as if a ghost had brushed her skin. She hadn't spoken much since the night of the storm. The police had come, taken our statements, and everything had unfolded fast. They'd found the syringe, the photos, the proof of the bribe to Dr. Henderson. It was enough to charge Jason with attempted murder, conspiracy, and unlawful entry. And still, part of me wished it didn't have to come to this. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge, a broad man with gray hair and eyes like cold steel, began reading the charges. Each word felt like a nail being driven into what remained of our family's history. Jason's lawyer, young, sharp, and too confident, argued that Jason had been under emotional distress, that he had never intended to harm me, that it was all a misunderstanding fueled by fear and financial pressure. I almost laughed. A misunderstanding doesn't involve syringes and hidden cameras. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, leaning on my cane. My voice was steady, though every word felt like lifting a stone. "Your Honor," I began, "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because I want my daughter to know the truth. Jason Miller tried to take my life, not out of madness, but out of greed. And he did it while smiling at my table, eating my food, calling me dad." Jason's lawyer objected, but the judge let me continue. "I forgave him once," I said, looking straight at Jason. "When he lost his business. When he borrowed money he never paid back. When he lied to my daughter about everything from his debts to his promises. But forgiveness doesn't mean blindness. Sometimes you have to open your eyes and see the monster standing in your living room." Jason's face twisted. "You ruined me, old man," he spat. "You took everything from me." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order." I didn't raise my voice. "You took it from yourself. You sold your soul for something as small as money. You tried to buy my death with it. Tell me, Jason, was it worth it?" For the first time, his mask cracked. His eyes glistened with something that almost looked like shame. But it was too late for redemption. Abigail sat behind me, crying quietly. I could feel her pain in the silence between sobs. When I sat back down, she reached out and took my hand, small, trembling, but firm. That one touch told me she finally understood. The trial lasted 2 days. The evidence was overwhelming. Henderson testified, his voice shaking but clear, admitting everything Jason had offered him. Mark provided the video recordings and financial reports. The jury didn't take long to decide. "Guilty," the foreman said. Jason stood motionless, his expression blank, as the judge sentenced him to 20 years in state prison. No outburst, no apology, just that same hollow stare he'd given me the night he'd whispered, "It's better this way." When they let him out, his eyes met mine for the last time. And in that look, I saw no hatred, no anger, only emptiness. The kind that comes when a man finally realizes he's broken everything he ever touched. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like flies. They shouted questions. "How do you feel, Mr. Wells? Did you ever forgive your son-in-law? What will happen to your daughter now?" I didn't answer any of them. Abigail clung to my arm, her face buried against my shoulder. When we reached the parking lot, she finally spoke. Dad, I had no idea. I didn't want to believe it. I turned to her, brushing away a tear. You weren't supposed to, sweetheart. You believed in love. There's no shame in that. She shook her head. I was blind. I thought he loved me. I sighed. Sometimes people love what you have, not who you are. She looked at me with weary eyes, the same eyes her mother once had, and whispered, How do you live with that? You don't, I said softly. You just learn to breathe around it. We drove home in silence. The clouds had finally cleared, sunlight glinting through the wet branches that arched over the old road. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed the oak tree again, the one Margaret and I planted the year Abigail was born. Its leaves shimmered in the light, stronger than ever after the storm. Abigail followed my gaze. You should cut that thing down someday, she said quietly. It's been through too much. I smiled faintly. No, honey. It's survived too much to be cut down now. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the stars. For the first time in months, I didn't feel hunted. I didn't feel angry, just tired. The kind of tired that comes after finishing a long, painful job. Justice had been done. But justice, I realized, is never clean. It leaves splinters under the skin, tiny reminders that peace always costs something. I closed my eyes, listening to the quiet hum of crickets, and thought of Margaret again, her voice soft and warm in my memory. You can build anything with your hands, Truman, but the hardest thing to build is peace. I whispered into the night. I'm still trying, love. Still trying. 3 months passed after the trial, yet the echoes of that courtroom still haunted me. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise out of habit, brewed my coffee, and stared at the empty chair across the kitchen table, the one Margaret used to sit in, and later, the one Jason had filled with false charm. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't comfort, it accused. Abigail had moved back in with me temporarily. She said it was to keep me company, but I knew better. She needed the company just as much. Her smile had changed, thinner, forced at the edges. Sometimes I'd catch her standing by the window, looking at the road as if expecting him to appear again. She never said his name anymore. We fell into a rhythm of unspoken healing. I cooked breakfast. She read the morning paper. We talked about the weather, about her work, about anything that didn't remind us of the trial. But every now and then, I'd catch her eyes glistening when the mail truck stopped by. She was waiting for something she'd never admit to, closure. One cold morning in January, that closure came, though not the way either of us expected. The envelope was thin, plain, with my name written in a familiar, trembling hand. The return address read Greenwood Correctional Facility. Jason. I stared at it for a long time, the coffee cooling in my cup. Abigail was upstairs, getting ready for work. I didn't want her to see it, at least not yet. So I took the letter out to the porch, where the winter air bit like truth. The paper inside was lined and creased, smudged in places where the pen had pressed too hard. Truman, I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because there's nothing else left to do here but think. The walls don't let you sleep. They echo your thoughts until they start sounding like voices. Maybe you know what that's like. I keep replaying that night. I see your eyes every time the lights go out. I don't know if I wanted you dead or if I just wanted everything to stop. The debt, the fear, the lies. I told myself I was doing it for Abigail, but I think I was just trying to bury the man I'd become. You probably think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But monsters don't wake up in the dark wishing they could undo everything. Tell Abigail I'm sorry. Don't tell her to forgive me. She shouldn't. Jason. I sat there for a long while, staring at the words until they blurred. Then I folded the letter carefully, as if it were made of glass. There was no anger in me anymore, just exhaustion, and something I hadn't felt in months, pity. That evening, Abigail came home to find the letter on the table. She froze when she saw his handwriting. Is that? Yes, I said softly. From him. She didn't speak, just sat down, unfolded the paper, and began to read. Her hands shook halfway through. When she finished, she pressed the letter against her chest and cried. Not loudly, not the kind of crying that needed comfort, but the quiet kind that empties the soul. I thought I hated him, she whispered. I wanted to hate him. I nodded. Sometimes hate feels safer than grief. She looked at me through tears. Do you hate him, Dad? I hesitated before answering. I did. For a long time. But hate's heavy. You carry it too long, and it starts to feel like part of you. I'm too old to carry anything that heavy anymore. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in months, it felt like the house could breathe again. Days turned into weeks. Abigail began smiling more, laughing even. She started volunteering at a local shelter, helping women get back on their feet. One night, she came home and said, "I think Mom would have been proud of us." I smiled. "She'd have been proud of you, sweetheart. I'm just trying to keep up." I went to bed early that night, and for the first time in a long while, I dreamed of peace. No storms, no shouting, just Margaret's voice humming softly in the kitchen, the smell of apple pie drifting through the house. When I woke, it took me a moment to remember she was gone. But even then, the dream didn't hurt. It felt like a promise kept. One afternoon in February, I took a drive out to the lake, the same place where Margaret and I used to go fishing when life still felt endless. I brought the letter with me, folded neatly in my jacket pocket. The wind was sharp, the water dark and still. I stood at the edge, read the letter one last time, then tore it slowly into pieces. The scraps fluttered into the lake, carried off by the ripples like tiny ghosts of forgiveness. "Goodbye, Jason," I murmured. "I hope you find whatever peace you couldn't find out here." As the paper disappeared beneath the surface, I felt something lift off my chest. Not joy, not satisfaction, but relief. The kind that comes when you finally stop holding on to pain. When I returned home, Abigail was waiting on the porch, smiling faintly. "You went to the lake," she said. I nodded. "Just needed some air." She squeezed my hand. "You look lighter." "Maybe I am," I said. "Maybe we both are." That night, we cooked dinner together. Something simple, something warm. The house was filled with laughter again, small and hesitant, like it was learning how to sound alive. As the clock ticked quietly on the wall, the new one, not the one shattered by that gunshot, I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge doesn't end when the guilty fall. It ends when the living learn to breathe again. The first morning of spring arrived quietly, almost shyly. A pale sun rising over the hills, the frost retreating from the fields like an old secret finally laid to rest. I stood by the window with my coffee, watching the world turn gold again. For months, my days had begun in silence. But this silence was different. It didn't accuse anymore. It comforted. Abigail had already left for work, her laughter echoing faintly from the driveway before the car door closed. That sound, small, simple, alive, was proof that life had found its way back into our home. The storm, the trial, the shadows of what Jason had done, all of it felt like something that had happened to another man in another lifetime. I wasn't that man anymore. The old me had been angry, wounded, desperate for justice. But justice, I learned, isn't about punishment. It's about peace. And peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It just settles quietly, like dust after a long storm. After breakfast, I walked down to my workshop for the first time in months. The smell of sawdust and oil still hung in the air. My tools sat exactly where I'd left them, waiting like patient old friends. The last thing I'd built before everything fell apart was a small wooden cradle, a gift for Abigail and Jason when they were talking about having a baby. It had never been used. I ran my hand along its smooth edge, feeling the faint grooves of my own fingerprints still embedded in the grain. For a moment, sadness flickered inside me, the ache of what might have been. But then I thought of how far we'd come, and how much still remained to build. I picked up a piece of oak, the same kind I used for the cradle, and set it on the bench. Not for her, not for him, but for myself. Something new, something honest. My hands, though older and stiffer now, still remembered the rhythm. Measure, cut, sand, breathe. Every stroke of the plane over the wood was a kind of prayer, not for forgiveness, but for release. Around noon, I took a break and stepped outside. The air smelled of rain and growing things. Across the yard, the old oak tree stood tall and unshaken, its branches stretching toward the light. I'd thought about cutting it down once, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Too many memories lived in its roots. Margaret's laughter, Abigail's first swing, the sound of life before everything went wrong. It had weathered storms, just like me. As I looked at it, I remembered something Margaret once said, years ago, when we were younger and still learning how to survive love and loss. You can't stop storms from coming, Truman. You just build stronger walls and wait for the morning. She'd been right, as always. Later, when Abigail came home, she found me sitting on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. She smiled, her eyes brighter than I'd seen them in years. "You've been working again," she said, noticing the sawdust on my shirt. "Trying to," I replied. "Thought it was time to make something that isn't broken." She sat beside me, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "I visited Mom today," she said quietly. "Took her flowers. Told her we're doing okay." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm sure she's proud of you." "She'd be proud of you too," she said. "You didn't let the darkness win." I smiled faintly. "It came close." "Maybe," she said, leaning against my shoulder. "But you're still standing." We sat there as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The crickets began their slow evening chorus, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked lazily at nothing. Life, ordinary, imperfect, but alive. That night, I found myself in Margaret's old room, the one I hadn't entered in years. Dust motes danced in the air, glowing in the moonlight. Her books still lined the shelves. Her favorite blue shawl still hung on the chair by the window. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered into the quiet. "It's over, love. He can't hurt her anymore. He can't hurt any of us." For the first time, I felt no need for revenge, no weight of anger in my chest. Just peace, fragile, precious peace. I took out the old photo from my wallet, Margaret holding baby Abigail in her arms, smiling at me from a lifetime ago. I set it on the nightstand and turned off the light. The next morning, I woke to birdsong and the smell of fresh bread. Abigail had been up early, baking, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. She was humming softly in the kitchen when I walked in. "Morning, Dad," she said, beaming. "Morning, sweetheart." We ate breakfast together while the sun climbed higher through the windows. For the first time, the light didn't feel harsh or unforgiving. It felt warm, healing. When we finished, I stepped outside once more, coffee in hand, and looked toward the oak tree. The wind moved through its branches gently, carrying the faintest whisper of leaves. I closed my eyes and listened. It almost sounded like Margaret's voice, soft and steady. "You built peace, Truman. You finally built it." I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. The quiet morning stretched before me, not empty, but full of something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope.